Julie began every counseling session somehow finding a way to find fault with herself for some small failing or problem that she had struggled with. A pleasant-looking woman in her mid-30s with an average life and an average set of problems. She always seemed to feel like she was driving into emotional potholes or taking the wrong exit with decisions and life direction. Whenever her therapist reflected that she had done or accomplished something, either past or present, that displayed some strength of character or some intelligent planning or thoughtfulness, Julie responded by downplaying her efforts and acts as though she had been somehow forced by circumstances outside of her will to make a responsible and successful move. When the therapist pointed out that one of the pivotal points in her life was when she lost her college grant money and family financial support, she then decided to work incredibly long hours at a restaurant job that allowed her to pay for her college classes and books out of pocket and earned her degree under incredible duress. She shrugged and said, "Well, I really had no choice. I couldn't just drop out and move back home. There was no other option." This deflecting of personal responsibility only applied to the things she had succeeded at, however, and not the laundry list of things she felt she had failed at. It became clear that this was at the heart of why she felt badly about herself. It was always, "Well, I really didn't have a choice." Every single time she was confronted with examples of her perseverance and willpower. We are all confronted with the need for a grading system from our earliest moments of independence from our parents, such as the moment we stepped into school. Starting from kindergarten, we are judged on a scale from our behaviors and our performance, and we internalize a way of seeing ourselves. I remember very well sitting down with my youngest daughter every day after she returned home from her first year in school, and I checked with her to see what color she ended up on the behavior chart. All parents are likely exposed to the concept of their children being moved up the chart or having their clip moved down and getting rewards or consequences as a result. But no matter what system we encounter in school, all of us develop our own internal and private grading system for ourselves that others cannot truly see in all its fullness and application. For sure, whatever internal grading system we develop is to one degree or another shaped by our parents and our primary caregivers, and they had a big hand in shaping how we see ourselves. But we as individuals have the right and the ability to paint it whatever color we want, for whatever reason we choose. As a therapist, I have had a front row seat to see and hear how people build this internal grading system and see how they apply it. It speaks volumes to the limitations of parenting. I know plenty of children who were trained with a very objective sense of grading oneself and still managed to twist it into something destructive. I remember one ultra-responsible young woman that came into my office who was actually a terrific mother and a highly skilled nurse that drove herself into a continual state of anxiety and long periods of depressed mood because she felt that she was always falling short of expectations that were best described as utterly unreasonable and unattainable. When we begin confronting the true reality of her perfectionism and how it slowly disintegrated her emotionally and physically, she became willing to look back to the roots and the creation of such an unfair and lopsided self-assessment scale. Surprisingly, she reported having had very supportive and enthusiastically positive parents who served as wonderful cheerleaders for everything she accomplished and succeeded at. I was perplexed at how she took this apparent warmth and encouraging pattern of parental reflection and twisted it into a broken mirror of self-disdain. She finally revealed that she never trusted their recurrent praise and completely discounted everything they ever said to her with a deflection of, "They're just saying those nice things because they're my parents and whatever they say doesn't count." As a result, she created a distorted mirror at a very young and inexperienced age that never reflected anything approaching success and was never content with anything she produced or became or achieved. The obvious problem with Julie's responses is that they cannot possibly be an accurate or even close to an accurate assessment of who she is and what has or is producing. In any situation we encounter that is a personal challenge or task, there are many more degrees of grading by the nature we can judge and assess success and failure by. Let's use a temperature gauge in a car, for example. Some cars have a dummy light that either stays off when the engine is operating under normal temperatures or shines bright red as an alert when the sensor detects a problem with overheating. Julie was asserting that this was an accurate gauge for judging success and failure and had said, "Well, I didn't want to fail, so I pushed forward so I wouldn't." There were only two opinions, and one was destructive. So why should I get credit for just not doing the failing thing? The problem is that most cars have a much more precise temperature gauge that goes beyond yes and no, and shows a scale from 0 degrees to perhaps 260 degrees, and has a number lines to mark the temperature grades in between. This seems to be a much more accurate way of understanding the results of personal choice and resulting successes and failures. I would like to argue that what Julie was saying to me was another version of straight A's are always accepted, in that straight A's are always expected, in that she was asserting that there were only two possible outcomes, and neither one was anything that could be celebrated or taken as any positive sign about herself. This is a distorted and limited view of the interpretive gauge that judges outcomes. I believe that there are probably limitless degrees of grades that can assess how well or how poorly we respond to life challenges, and that this scale points towards many possible ways to critique or praise ourselves for our efforts. Limiting ourselves to some strange pass or fail grading system would absolutely inhibit our personal growth and development. It will also stunt our problem-solving abilities, as well as sticking ourselves with a perpetual black cloud that follows us overhead, like that Flintstones character Skelp Rock had, and rains scorn and self-loathing down on us as we try to work through life. Let me try and give the opposing viewpoint by using her working while attending school analogy from a personal stance. Probably the best time in my overall life was when I moved to Texas to attend school full-time in my early 20s. I was under the pressure of having a limited-term scholarship to accomplish all the classes necessary to complete my degree, and also faced very difficult classes that I was uncertain as to whether I could pass successfully. To say I had initial anxiety when I showed up on campus would be fair, if not an understatement, and it was an honest assessment of a fairly difficult challenge. One of the things I am most proud of in life is that I worked at a part-time job. One of the things I am most proud of in life is that I worked a part-time restaurant job to support myself on campus and took a full load of classes every semester, including the summer term, and graduated in 2.5 years. I felt I proved that I could work under pressure and that I had an above-average work ethic. Looking at my experience with a larger gauge, with many different marks on it, I'm sure that I could have been even better at time management and studied even more disciplined manner and pushed myself even harder to get stronger grades than I did. I'm sure I could have been more selective about how I socialized, and I remember quite a few wasted evenings with people that I can barely place that didn't evolve into long-term relationships. I even had a couple dates with young women that I had either no serious interest in or no chance to develop anything with. Maybe I could have even picked a better restaurant job to work at. Hindsight tells me that I could have worked in a high-end serving job at a higher class place that a friend of mine tried to talk me into working at. While I could self-critique my time in college better than anyone, though, the reality was that I graduated with pretty solid grade point average and felt good about being competitive with people whose intellect I respected. I had all sorts of great experiences when it came to learning and expanding my consciousness intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. I felt I did a good job of taking advantage of the opportunities that I was offered. My time there ended up with a set of wonderful memories with lifelong friends with whom I keep up with to this day as well, and it would be ingenuous to grade such a multifaceted and intricate set of experiences with either a wholesale idealistic A plus or a pessimistic sense of abject failure, because I didn't hit all the possible marks I could have. Overall, I would have graded myself as being in the 85 to 90 range for how well I performed under pressure. And I gave myself considerable credit for succeeding and getting to move on to the next level in my education and personal and professional development. I couldn't help but wonder when listening to Julie write off a whole 3-year period of her life as having been one lack of choice, just how many wide and varied experiences she had that were both some degree of successes and failures. How many deep experiences did Julie ignore or write off that she could have used either as an incredible learning experiences or as essential building blocks of healthy self-thoughtful resilience, or as essential building blocks of healthy self-esteem that proved her capacity for endurance, hard work, thoughtful resilience, or adaptive intelligence. How many colorful and memorable experiences with people, places, and things got lost in a simplistic and dulled grading system that didn't allow for anything but the blackness of failure or the dingy grayness of a half-hearted success. The essence of all clinical depression is a distorted sense of what is real and a deliberate, if not always conscious, diminishment of everything we do and all that is good and worthy of respect or exaggeration of our own perceived faults. In this case, Julie had minimized an entire set of life experiences that culminated into what should have been a foundational victory in her life against adversary and stress, and proved her with the proof that she was in her life against adversity and stress, and provided her with the proof that she was capable of navigating through stormy seas and choppy waters to achieve something needful and that made her life better. Instead, she reduced all of these small and daily struggles she experienced at college that required a whole host of life skills, such as patience, diligence, and the ability to concentrate on tasks that required extreme discipline and mental effort, into a bland, so what? That response reeks of dismissiveness and detachment, and projects any credit onto some anonymous process she acted as though she had no control over. This minimization is what therapists call cognitive distortion, and is best described in every language as misinterpretation of what is actually true. My response to someone who has learned to use this phrase to diminish their accomplishments and who has likely picked up some form of perfectionism like a rampant virus is to challenge this two-outcome view of life as patently untrue and destructive to their mental health as a result. Instead, I would argue that he or she should expand their scale and accept that there are endless possibilities of grading one's performance with a wide swath of degrees to determine success or failure. This ability to grade one's accomplishments or experiences is an ongoing skill that we learn over time. The first step is accepting that there is a limitless outcome view of life and rejecting the idea that I had no choice but to succeed, in favor of willingness to give yourself whatever grade you truly deserve. The second is to develop an accurate mirror that can give you an accurate reflection of yourself, one in which you can see and absorb complicated nuances of successes and failures, and give yourself a genuinely accurate grade for what you do and do not do. Self-grading is a giant part of the process of becoming emotionally independent and cognitively independent, and is always a central goal for any parent to coach their offspring into having and using appropriately. While it is possible, as from my example above, that someone could develop a perfectionist view of life despite whatever their parents or peers tell them, it's generally true that we inherit the distorted values behind this phrase, "I really had no choice to succeed," from our caregivers or those who we originally give the power to grade our efforts. In Julie's case, taking the subtle grading over back for herself and then learning to do it with skill and grace and accuracy is paramount to achieving emotional freedom and an accurate sense of one's own talent, worth, and skills. Over time, Julie began to identify that she disqualifies the positive as a depressive symptom, and that is part of an unfair grading system that she not only applies to herself, but one that has caused her to have a distorted perception of herself. Slowly, she began to accept that she indeed had a myriad of choices when confronted with losing her college funding, such as she could have dropped out of school, become angry or depressed, or even self-destructive and fallen into a series of menial or dead-end jobs. She now has begun to see that her grading system should change in all her subjects, and that she should apply the concept of choice and multiple outcomes to everything she has done, and not just the poor decisions and failed ventures. As a result, Julie began to see that she has highly valuable positive traits and is a strong and resilient young woman who is much more capable of fighting and thinking through life challenges. Ultimately, her depressive thinking patterns became reduced. As the months rolled by, she began to respect and even like who she has become, and is increasingly motivated to face daily challenges and new friendship with this much healthier and brighter self-outlook.